Today we're doing a four-wheel brake job, just pads and rotors, on my 2014 BMW 535i xDrive. Okay, I've got my wheel off here. First thing I'm going to do is take my new parts, which I got from Rock Auto. They're all the PowerStop parts, just the daily driver kit they have that has new rotors and pads. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to hold the rotor up against this old one and the pads up and just match it up. Just want to make sure it all fits right. So here I am, just holding it up against it. I'm checking the diameter, I'm checking the widths, making sure everything kind of matches up properly before I really tear this thing apart. It often happens that the wrong parts come, so as many of these quick checks as you can do before you get there, the better. So in order to take the rotor off, I have to take the caliper and bracket off. Usually that is a two-piece on many cars, but this actually is all integrated. The caliper and the caliper bracket are one piece here. So on the back, I've got these little caps right here. I'm going to pop those off with a Phillips head or a flathead screwdriver. And then I'm going to get in there with a Torx key, the proper size for this, which I'll figure out in just a moment from my kit. And I'm going to take two bolts out of there. That's going to allow me to slide this entire caliper and bracket assembly off of there, and then we're going to prop that up. Okay, now that I've gotten those out, I'm going to just pull this back. You can see the pad just fell right out of there. This hasn't been done in quite a while. You can see the two Torx key bolts that I had to loosen, one top, one bottom, and disconnected the brake sensor, which actually was attached to the top of the pad. I don't think my new set came with the sensors, so I had to pry that off just gently. That was stuck in there in the pad, if you can see that. And now I'm going to prop this up so that it's not hanging by the brake line, and then I'm going to take out the bolts for this secondary bracket here that's trapping the rotor in. And those secondary bolts, they're just on the back of it, one top, one bottom, similarly. You might be able to see it in there. I think they're 17 millimeter, so I will confirm. The Torx key to take those out of the primary caliper bracket was a T45. And now that my secondary bracket is off, these turned out to be 18 millimeter. I've put that down, and next thing I got to do is take the rotor off. These are usually frozen to the hub in some form, so I'm going to use Jeremy Clarkson's favorite tool, the hammer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap kind of in a three spot pattern here. But actually, I just noticed we've got a retainer bolt here. We've got to take that out with a hex key. So I'm going to find that. I'm going to pull that out of there. I want to make sure it's not retained by anything like that. And then I'm going to go around and tap it if it doesn't just fall right off the hub. Once I took that little retainer nut out of there, the rotor actually just came right off. So it was totally fine there. My next steps are to clean this up. I'm going to use a wire wheel, clean all this up, put some anti-seize on here, which if you're not careful will literally get all over you, and then put my new rotor on and put that retaining clip or that retaining nut back in there. Rotor is on, retainer clips in, or retainer bolt, I don't know why I keep saying that. My next step is to compress the piston so that it fits over the new pads. And I'm going to take those two bolts out and grease them up and put them back into their slots there. And then I'll get everything put back together with the new pads. Putting the new pads in now, you can see when I place this pad here, I'm putting a little bit of grease on the ends, on the slides, where it's going to slide in and out on this bracket. And yes, I apologize, the caliper is hanging right now, but doing the same thing. So the inner pad actually has a little bit of a bracket that slips inside the piston there. So you push it in there, it kind of snaps in place. And I'm going to put the grease onto the ends of that as well before I slide it onto the secondary bracket there. Alright, everything's in place now. I've tightened up the two Torx keys, the T45s on the back of the primary caliper and bracket. Tightened up the 18 millimeters on the secondary, greased up everything there, and then went over it again, double checked all 4 bolts. Definitely double check everything. These are brakes. And the last thing here before I put the wheel back on is this new external retainer bracket. This thing just snaps into place. There's no bolts or clips or anything. And it kind of just sits right in here, right over top of the caliper. I'm going to need 2 hands to put that in there. So we'll take a look at it when it's all done. Got my new clip in there, and now we're going to put the wheel on, torque it down, and that's it. That's front brakes on this car. I know I went through it fast, so feel free to ask me any questions. Alright, as I go through the rear brakes here, just a couple of quick notes. So it's a little bit different. We don't have those Torx keys to take out the main bracket. We have these regular little bolts here, and they are a 13 millimeter. They go in each of those, and they connect into the back of the bracket here. So when I put that back up, which again, I apologize, it's hanging. I know people get bent out of shape about that, but that'll go right into these slides here, and you got to hold both sides of that. So put like a 15 millimeter around that, and then tighten up the 13 on the back of that. Sorry, I'm not showing it there. The piston for these calipers, make sure your parking brake's off. This is all parking brake electronics here. But the pistons themselves, they're actually a twist and push type of piston. So you can't just compress them straight up. You actually have to twist that piece clockwise a couple of turns, then you can push it in a few millimeters. Then twist it clockwise a couple of turns, then push it in a few millimeters, and just keep doing that until you get it all the way in there so it fits around the new pads. And I did that I have the right tool for it, but I did it the old school way where I twisted clockwise with that a little bit, just being careful of the boot there, that I don't tear it, and then I pushed it in with the larger channel lock there until I got it all the way in. Now I'm ready to put it back on here. The kit came with these new shims, so I put the new shims on there, just basically pry the old ones off with a little screwdriver, and then put my grease around the edges of the pads and slid them in there. Now I'm all ready to put that back on. The rear rotor is very similar. It's got that little retaining bolt, and I cleaned up the hub and put the anti-seize around it. And yep, like I said, now I'm ready to put it back together. And that's the rear brake portion of this.